with the Houston Texans in a new lineup, being drafted as a mid to low end RB2. Now, provided he stays healthy, that's the key. Provided DJ stays healthy, his numbers from early last year could be a floor to what he can do for the Houston Texans. Now remember, Houston has an offensive line that was a top 12 run blocking line in 2019. Houston was 12th in rushing attempts last season. So, volume is there for David Johnson. Blocking is there for David Johnson. And if he can stay healthy, that's the big IF. If he can stay healthy, then he's a dark horse candidate for comeback player of the year. Another running back. My third one. Talking about volume being king. And, I've talked about in baseball, football, the same thing. I want a player who's going to get the opportunity. Whoever's going to get the opportunity has a really good shot of being successful in the NFL. So let's talk about David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. Now, Montgomery was 12th in touches among all running backs last season. He was 13th in juke rate, evading tackles. He is a runner that's going to lean heavily on his upfront blocking. And the big problem with the Bears' offensive line was that they were a bottom 5 unit. So their run blocking is not improved on paper, but Montgomery has some positive factors working in his favor other than the O-line. First of all, he's not going to be challenged on early downs by any other running back. The Bears only have another player named Ryan Nall, and Artavius Pierce behind Montgomery, and neither one of them are challenging Montgomery for touches on early downs. So that's one thing in Montgomery's favor. The arrival of Nick Foles at quarterback. Now, I know there's talk about Foles not starting week 1. Mitch Trubisky will be the starter week 1, it looks like, for Chicago. But I think if Trubisky succeeds and he stays there, that only helps Montgomery. If he fails and Foles comes in, that helps Montgomery. So Foles has this immobility that can open up some check down passes for Montgomery, and in full point or half point PPR, that makes him even more valuable. Last year, for example, with Nick Foles under center, Leonard Fournette saw his target share passing increase from 15 to 21%. So, if Montgomery can see a similar increase in pass catching ability and opportunities, it makes him a more interesting and valuable fantasy asset. Now, I know Tariq Cohen's going to get some targets in this offense, but if Tariq Cohen, who was not explosive last year, doesn't regain that explosiveness, it only adds more weight to why you should pick up David Montgomery for the Bears. So, I think Montgomery is screaming out loud in value, and I think he's a player that you need to take. Let's talk about wide receivers. Let's go to the left bank, Robert Woods. Robert Woods. Woods, 3 years as a Ram, he's never finished outside the top 20 in PPR fantasy points per game. Over those last 3 years, he was wide receiver 19 in 2017, wide receiver 16 in 2018, and wide receiver 13 last year. Despite missing a game last year, he still set new career highs in targets, not sure what happened. I guess we're back to Robert Woods. PPR, last 3 years, wide receiver 19, 16, and 13. 13 last year. And despite missing one game last year, he still set career new highs in targets with 139 targets and in receptions with 90. Now, I don't think the Rams' defense, from everything I've read, got any better in the offseason. So I don't expect the passing to slow down, which is another reason why you also might want to look at their quarterback. That's right. But right now I'm talking about Robert Woods and McVay's system. So I think Woods is in every play, on every snap. If his touchdown count could increase, he only had 2 last year, then he really could be a value pick in this draft. Another wide receiver that I want you to keep your eye on is Michael Gallup, wide receiver, America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, last year was Gallup's sophomore season, and he was wide receiver 18 across the whole league. He joined Tyreek Hill, Odell Beckham Jr., Allen Robinson, and Courtland Sutton as the only second-year wide receivers in the last 5 years to surpass 1,100 receiving yards. And he had an 8.9 yards per target and 6 touchdowns. Now, I know the Cowboys drafted CeeDee Lamb. Okay, but they've got Gallup. And though Gallup may be capped a little bit by Lamb, I think Gallup will still reprise his role as Dak Prescott's go-to guy. You know, Amari Cooper had some really good games for the Cowboys, and then there were games where he didn't show up. And he was the same with the Raiders. Really good games mixed in with some I didn't show up games. Gallup shows up every game. And I just wonder how long it may be before the trust of Dak Prescott totally vests in Gallup and not so much in Amari Cooper. Now, I think they'll be passing aplenty. I hate to say it, but I think the defense who lost Robert Quinn, they lost Byron Jones. They're going to start the year with a couple of linebackers on the IL, I understand. Dallas was 9th in passing while trailing last year. So Gallup, to me, makes plenty of sense as a wide receiver that can be drafted as a wide receiver 3 and offers wide receiver 2 production. There you go. Let's talk about tight end. Just trying to give you some players. I'm not sure if you're drafting tonight. Here's some tight ends to think about. And these are late rounders. Again, I'm not talking about going to Kansas City and getting a tight end. I'm going down the line here, okay? All right. First of all, Miami. I've already told you Fitzpatrick's going to throw the ball a lot. Miami has a tight end named Mike Gesicki. And Gesicki, he lined up last year 17% of the time as a wide receiver. Okay? So he is a primary receiving tight end. He basically stinks as a blocker. Great receiver, though. And look what Chan Daly has done. He's funneled his passing attacks through 2 main cogs. During his last stop with the Jets, that was Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker, or Quincy Enunwa. No doubt, Devontae Parker will probably lead the Dolphins in receptions this year. I don't have a doubt on that. But the slot component in 2020 will be Gesicki. He was 4th last season in yards at tight end, only behind Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, and Mark Andrews. So I think Gesicki has a 2019 Darren Walker-esque season in range of outcomes for 2020. So yes, maybe we do pick up a Dolphin, and I think Gesicki could be a great value at tight end. Another potential good value at tight end, I love Jonnu Smith, tight end for the Tennessee Titans. Now, he's the clear-cut starter to start at tight end for the Titans. He was a dynamic player last year. He was 11th in yards per pass route and 9th in yards after catch. Tennessee, well, they don't have to really change a lot here. Smith was a top 12 tight end at season's end. And in Tannehill's 10 starts, Smith was the tight end 13, despite only 3.6 targets per game. So, it's what he does after the catch. He's an explosive tight end, fast runner, and I think Jonnu Smith, again, is a really good player to look for late as a tight end. Now, I mentioned Jalen Reagor earlier for the Philadelphia Eagles. I want to talk about a few rookies for just a moment. Reagor was a reach, I think, in the draft at 21 overall, but he's one of the draft's most electric players. He probably is comparable explosiveness-wise to Henry Ruggs for the Las Vegas Raiders. And despite some size limitations, he has a great leaping ability, great speed, played outside at TCU predominantly. And I think when he teams with Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey has health concerns. I think Reagor could be a high-volume, very high-volume tight end. Question about where do I rate Ebron among tight ends? Well, let's take a look at that for just a moment. You got to look at all of the tight ends who are out there. And as I look at the tight end, Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, Ertz, and Walker, to me, are your top 5 tight end options. Okay? I like Noah Fant for Denver. I like Hunter Henry for the Chargers. I like Tyler Higbee. I like Hayden Hurst. I think Ebron, for me, is the 12th tight end. That's where I rank him. But 12th tight end means I can get him late in drafts. How will Ebron rate up against the elite? Well, he's not going to have the numbers of a Kelsey or a Kittle. Okay? But from reading the beat writers, and that's what I think you need to do when you're looking at your fantasy teams, go research what the beat writers are saying about the different teams who follow the teams at practice every day. And when we look at Ebron being used at all over the field, in every play formation, Big Ben trusting him, the Steelers not carrying extra wide receivers because of the role that Ebron is going to play in the offense, I've got him as tight end 12. Who's after him? Well, I got Gesicki at 13. Now just talk about him. I think there's a lot of value late at tight end. You're going to see some teams in your leagues go draft Kelsey in the first and second round. I'm not saying that's a bad move. Kelsey's a great player. But I think you can go pick up a more valuable wide receiver or running back early, pass on Kelsey, get a Hunter Henry, Hayden Hurst, Mike Gorecki, Ebron later in drafts. You'll still get points. And face it, there are going to be games where Kansas City, outside of games maybe with teams like, I don't know, Oakland or Denver, they're probably going to try to run the ball a little more then. But you're going to have games where Kansas City's not passing the ball as much. I think those AFC West contests this year will be highly contested, grind-out kind of games. So and 8 of their games are against AFC West. I mean, the Raiders are better. I think the Broncos are better. The Chargers' defense is pretty good. So it's going to be an interesting thing how those top-flight tight ends compare to your tight end 8, tight end 9, tight end 10. That's it. Well, while I'm on the Steelers talking about their tight end, I'd like to look at their wide receiver situation. You know we got Juju Smith-Schuster as their number 1 guy, okay? And there's no doubt that Juju will be ranked as number 1. But a sneaky pick at wide receiver in Pittsburgh is Deontay Johnson. And everything I'm reading out of Pittsburgh is that in practice, Big Ben is looking for Deontay Johnson on pass plays. Now, when he's doing that in practice, that would infer to me Big Ben is going to be also doing that in games. Deontay Johnson in my chart